Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Indaba Africa once more. Today's topic is Sudan leaving the Middle Ages. Has Khartoum decided to leave the Dark Ages and enter the 21st century with significant changes to its legal code that began to take place in July of 2020? A year after the ouster of convicted former Sudanese President Omar al-Bashir, who after 3 decades was booted from office unceremoniously in April of 2019. And 3 decades of Islamist law, Sudan is showing signs of leaving behind the medieval legal codes, at least for non-Muslims. Several new laws have been implemented in July of 2020. Sudan has now banned female genital mutilation. While this is a very encouraging development to see it entered into the legal code, this barbaric practice is illegal. Discouraging it or preventing it will prove to be far more difficult. This cultural practice is established in many parts of the Middle East and around the Sahel belt of Africa. And eliminating it in actual practice will prove very difficult. Nonetheless, to see the government actually make it illegal is quite a refreshing sign and a nice advancement for the rights of women. Now, this practice itself is carried out by folks from Sudan who immigrate to other countries like the United Kingdom and the USA. The practice has gotten so out of hand, not simply by Sudanese, but also by Egyptians, Nigerians, Chadians, Nigerians, Yemenis, and others who come to the United States and the United Kingdom, migrate here, become permanent residents and or citizens of those countries, yet send their young daughters back to visit granny or the aunt to have this brutal procedure performed on them as they reach puberty. It's good to see Sudan make it illegal. Perhaps that will lead to some reciprocity for these parents who seek to molest and sexually harm their children by doing this practice. Additionally, women are no longer required to seek permission from a male relative whenever they travel with their own children. Yeah, that's right. Under the Islamic codes in place in Sudan, women needed the permission of a male relative in order to travel with their own children. That has now been rescinded as well. And perhaps the biggest news coming out of Khartoum for those living in Sudan is that non-Muslims are now permitted to drink, import, and sell alcohol. That's right. Drink, import, and sell alcohol for the first time since these codes were imposed 3 decades ago. This applies only to non-Muslims. The prohibition on drinking alcohol still applies to Muslims, as does the sale and importation of it. Now, the irony about the Sudanese lifting the ban on alcohol this week is that this makes the historically repressive Sudan freer than South Africa, where the National Coronavirus Command Council has once again, through capricious governance and undemocratic, unelected, unaccountable governance, banned the sale of alcohol effective today, the 13th of July, 2020, over flimsy evidence which they don't provide to the public, they simply claim is affecting the number of people showing up in hospitals and clinics because of alcohol-related incidents. So ironically, folks, Sudan is freer than South Africa when it comes to alcohol anyway. Additionally, public flogging has now been scrapped. People will no longer be flogged publicly. This barbaric medieval practice meant to shame, humiliate, and make people suffer for minor, trivial offenses, most of which were offenses that apply under Islamic law, Sharia, but they were applied to non-Muslims like Christians who were openly flogged in public. And perhaps one of the most encouraging things for all of this is Sudan's apostasy law has now been scrapped as well. What is apostasy? Apostasy is the abandonment or renunciation of one's religion or political beliefs. Now, why does this matter? Because it included the death penalty. If you were a Muslim and you were involved in apostasy, you could be sentenced to death. Now, famously in 2014, this happened to a young pregnant woman who was 27 years the age at the time, Mariam Mashag, who married a Christian. She had a father who renounced his Christianity, became a Muslim, had a Muslim mother. The father was absent. She was raised as a Christian. She married a Christian man, Daniel Wani. And the relatives kept turning her in, as, snitches do in the German Democratic Republic and in South Africa today. Snitches do turn people in. And so in Sudan, relatives, own family members, repeatedly turned her into authorities. Eventually, authorities arrested her. She was tried, and she was convicted and sentenced to be hanged. 27-year-old woman, for being raised as a Christian, but because she had a Muslim father who was not present nothing to do with her upbringing. She was expected to be a Muslim. Now, this apostasy law caused lots of consternation in the West. The young lady and her husband got an exit visa from the U.S. ambassador, and they boarded a flight in Khartoum only to be stopped and arrested and detained by the police. And then, of course, the American ambassador was summoned for a dressing down by the Sudanese officials for having the audacity to issue an exit visa or an entrance visa to the United States for Miss Ishaq and her husband. Now, in addition to this, there's been some other developments in Sudan that are also encouraging taking place. So as late as November, a restrictive public order law that controlled how women acted and dressed in public, that was also rescinded. So these are some good signs that perhaps Sudan is leaving the dark ages. Now, bear in mind that this comes in the midst of a fragile government, a fragile, fractious government that's comprised of several groups that opposed al-Bashir. And their tenure in government, their position is not guaranteed. So we could see these laws reversed if Islamists take over in Khartoum once again. But the current Justice Minister, Nasreddin Abdulbari, said that we will drop all laws violating the human rights in Sudan. Excellent. That's very encouraging for him to say. Wonderful. He has mentioned, he's explaining to the BBC, for instance, that the law on apostasy was an apostate is a person who is a threat to security and safety of society. Now, that's interesting. Being a Christian makes you a threat to society? How is that? Well, that is the case in Sudan until now. The apostasy law has been rescinded in Sudan. So, ladies and gentlemen, very encouraging news for the rights of women and for children and for non-Muslim minorities. Non-Muslims make up 3% of Sudan's 42 million population. Now, Sudan famously had a nearly 4-decade civil war, which eventually led to the country being divided in two, with South Sudan, predominantly Christian and animist population, leaving Sudan in 2011. And now what's left is the remainder of the country, which is predominantly Afro-Arab, and 42 million people with 3% who are non-Muslims. And their rights were denied until recently. Now here we sit in July 2020, and Sudan looks to be seeking to enter the 21st century and leave behind its repressive, brutal laws which were applied indiscriminately to non-Muslims. Folks in Khartoum who are non-Muslims can drink once again alcohol, which is freer than South Africa, ladies and gentlemen. And public floggings are now banned. Female genital mutilation is illegal, at least according to law. Women no longer need permission of a male relative to travel with their own children. And apostasy is no longer the order of the day. That law has been scrapped. Ladies and gentlemen, if you found this video interesting or thought-provoking, or maybe just something you enjoyed watching, if you're not a subscriber already to Chris White Africa, I ask you to smash that subscription button right down there, and be sure to toggle that bell icon so you're notified of any updates on my channel, whether it's a live stream from my Stray Voltage series, or it is a special feature guest, or my regular Saturday stream, as well as prepared videos like this. Also, feel free to leave comments. I try to read all comments, and where appropriate, I respond. And finally, I ask that you smash that like button down there, because the more likes as a percentage of views of this video, the more likely it is that other people will be aware of it and see the video, and they can watch it. And I thank you for your time and for your patronage.